One was the one, and you were like, okay, I'm performance driven. I like the speed.
It was so far ahead of its time, so far ahead of its time. And what I liked about it was it came out of a racing company, and they were hitting speeds and categories of performance that were unheard of. And there was a singular focus to literally make it the best performance road car that they could make it. And it actually exceeded what they thought it would do. It also excites me about the 765T that's arriving in a few months, because when they did the initial release of its performance statistics, they said, well, we're estimating it's going to do X, Y, and Z, or but then when they did the press day, I don't know if you're aware in the media, and they actually got the press in, like the press release, it beat all those performance metrics. So it excites me when a company's so focused, and obviously so much on song in terms of what they're able to produce, that the product is almost better than the sum of its parts. So I think at this point in time, notwithstanding the financial issues they're having, I still think from a product perspective, the company is still producing things which are very, very special.
Nice. So do you think that interact, because I mean, the 720S is going to be what that was in your childhood, that the F1 was. So do you think that is what basically inspired you to do what you currently do? Because if we literally take it back to, okay, now you're in this position, you can interact with the manufacturers, you can interact, with the actual dealers and all that. But if we go back to the beginning and you selecting, okay, I want to be this, you know what I mean? Was that almost like coming together to make you make that decision? So if you go into what you do and why you chose that.
Look, I think if you're thinking about what I was doing professionally, I was practical enough to, although they're better lines than the one I'm in if you want to have a fleet of hypercars or supercars, but given, I would still encourage anyone to pursue your profession in your area of interest and your area of talent. I don't think you will have sustained success if you're operating in an area where your heart isn't in it. You need to get a buzz out of it. You need to get a sense of satisfaction. It almost needs to be something intrinsic to you that you enjoy doing. I need to be very clear about that. That can be misinterpreted though. That doesn't mean that you make a concerted decision to choose a particular area you want to dedicate your life to, and you quit when it gets hard because it's not for you. That's not what I'm saying at all. Because if your end goal, whatever that is, means enough to you, and the process means enough to you, and you're dedicated to it, you will be able to go through incredible hardship. You may not enjoy the process, but you will never question why, nor will you deviate from the path. It takes resilience and mental toughness. So, I mean, I came from my parents were tertiary educated, they were doctors, so, but their story also, was inspirational for me. I mean, my father was born in 1947, which was the year of Indian independence. Okay, so the country was clearly not in a good state, politically or socially. So the circumstances where he grew up in was probably one rung above poverty. They had food and they had clothing, but he was one of 11 siblings, so they had a house, but they didn't have much more than that. So it's not that they went without food or they went without shelter, but that was literally all they had. So would they have had a motor vehicle in their house? No. He managed to get a scholarship to medical school, graduated, and then ended up going to the United Kingdom for his specialist training, and then ended up coming to Australia in the 70s, liking the place, going back to the UK, finishing his training, and that's where I was born, and then coming back to Australia in the early 80s to settle. He retired last year, and at the beginning of last year on Australia's Day, he was awarded an Order of Australia Medal. So what that tells, if you look at that man's life, was he was doing what spoke to him. I mean, his profession was a huge part of the person he was. And his level of dedication was something I saw every single day. So, and I could see in order for him to be able to provide for me what he did, and the same goes for my mother, that there was huge sacrifice on their behalf. So if my path, yes, there have been difficulties, but not to the degree that they had. Because what they could provide me, which they got through their own efforts, but what my parents could provide me directly was opportunity, and the opportunity to get educated. And I never took that for granted. So was I ever in a position where I could tell Dad, hey, Dad, let's go and buy a Ferrari? Of course not. I mean, my childhood was much more modest than that. But they instilled in me that, and they provided me opportunities where I knew that if I grabbed that opportunity, I could build on what they had. So, and that's one thing which is really, really important for me. I mean, I'm relatively tolerant of most perspectives and points of view. Obviously, I have my own, and I can be dogmatic and dig my heels in on certain things I believe, but there is one thing that really gets under my skin and which will irritate me. So if you fall into this category, bluntly speaking, we are not going to get along. I'm not going to enjoy your company at all. And it's people who squander or don't avail themselves of opportunity. And I feel very passionately about it because everyone in their life has a degree of opportunity. Some have more, some have less. That's just the cards you're dealt with. But for all of us to be sitting here right in this moment, we've clearly had opportune circumstances to get us here.
Yes.
That means there's 7.2 billion people on the planet. What's the percentage of those that have been afforded the opportunity you've had, I've had, or you've had? It would be the vast minority that have had the same degree or more. Vast minority. The vast majority don't. So that means wherever we're sitting at the moment, there is an onus on us to passionately pursue what we do with dedication and with a degree of mental toughness and fortitude. Not for you, not for me, not for you, but who should you look at the beneficiaries of your success and your pursuit? Your family, your community, your city, your country, and the world at large. Because whatever opportunity I was given, and I'm grateful for that, if I didn't maximize that and I didn't push myself, what's to say another individual in the world who didn't get those opportunities I had, but put in my circumstance, wouldn't have run 1,000 kilometers down the road further than I did, right? Yeah. So if you look at it from that point of view, you actually owe it to humankind to be the best you can be. A positive spin-off, a positive side effect of that is you can get the trappings of success. Yeah. But I think if you're simply pursuing that, and I have no problem if someone says, it's my dream to have a Ferrari. Go for it as hard as you can. But I promise you, if you pursue what you do honestly and you dedicate yourself to it, once you get the Ferrari, your horizons are going to expand so much, right? Suddenly, the Ferrari isn't quite so special anymore, but there's something else which is bigger and on the horizon. And that also brings me to something what I call is the sense of urgency. And perhaps that's why I like fast things. One of my weaknesses is a lack of patience, although after becoming a father, it mellows you and it calms you down, because if you try and teach a toddler a task, they're clearly not going to get it on the first go. So I've calmed in that regard, but intrinsically I'm not a patient person. I find I can assess information and react to things rapidly. That's perhaps why I like driving on track. You have milliseconds to make a decision, right? I mean, even at an amateur day, we're timing ourselves to the thousandth of a second.
That's the thing that first time I met you and asked whether you wanted to be on the podcast, before I could even finish a sentence, you were already saying, when do you want to do it?
Exactly.
It was so quick, it took me by such surprise. I thought you were just trying to end the conversation and get out of there.
Quite the opposite, because we're here now, so quite the opposite to ending a conversation is rather trying to start one, yeah. Exactly. So it's that sense of urgency. So I think if you're going to do anything well, you need that sense of urgency. So you need to find what speaks to you, and you need to do it quickly. It's all well and good if you're 25, 30, 22, whatever it is, and you need to do this early in life, saying, I'm still finding my way. I'm still finding my way. I hear a lot of people say that. I don't know what I want to do. I question, is it really that hard? Or is it that because it's not a party every day, and it's not, the success isn't immediately being presented to you, you're not immediately experiencing it, is that why people lose motivation and are still trying to find their way? Maybe I'm wrong, because I've always sort of been focused in, and I had an idea of the area I wanted to go into and pursue that. Yeah.
Because I think that's a very important part, which is what a child who more likely wouldn't know what an orthodontist is. So was there a particular point in time? Was it influence from your parents, the fact that they had a professional background in medicine that they
themselves? I think clearly my parents had a huge influence from them. I had a lot of respect for them, particularly as I got older and learnt their personal stories, and realised that, and I thought it was an honourable profession. My father was treated with a lot of respect, and he effected a positive change. So for me, an ideal profession is one that stimulates me mentally, makes me think quickly, makes me act quickly, and believe it or not, orthodontics requires a high degree of mental agility and thinking very, very quickly. And I'm one that affects a positive change directly on the people you're interacting with, in my case, patients, but also on the people you care about. That means your family and your community and everything else. So that can be in a variety of ways, but clearly I had also a desire to have a supercar. That was a dream for me. Yeah. So if you're keeping that point in mind, one of my favorite cars was the Mercedes SL500, the convertible. I think they called it the R230. It was the 1990s boxier design. Very Teutonic in its design, right? And I liked that car, and I remember I would have been a young boy going to dinner with my family, and it was a hot summer night, and my auntie lived in Strathfield at the time. So we're going to a restaurant near there's the shops there. I haven't been there for a long time, but where the train station is, if it's still was that at the end of the boulevard, there's that street with the restaurant. So I can't remember the exact restaurant we were going to, but it was. So the apartment my auntie lived in was within walking distance of that. So we were just walking. And on the way back from the restaurant, I still remember it, I saw a white SL500 parked. The fellow was in it, the lights were on, the motor was running. Perhaps he was waiting for someone with the top down. It was probably a Sydney summer night, about 30 degrees, 29 degrees. I looked at that car and I thought that was absolutely stunning. And the fellow sitting in the car saw me and smiled at me, and I smiled at him. No words were exchanged. And but as a young boy, that was a nice recognition that the guy who owned the car looked at me and smiled. Probably my jaw was dragging on the ground, so he thought it was amusing. Then, so my interaction up to that point in time with doctors had been, my parents obviously, but you have a child-parent relationship with them, but my father's colleagues. Then I ran into an orthodontist who treated me, who was much cooler than all of those guys, way cooler. And he's still practicing now, and we're still in touch all these years later. And perhaps to build rapport, he was talking to me and he said, I hear you like cars. And I said, yeah, I like cars a lot. He goes, come over here. So he was in a multi-story building. So he pulls me over the window and says, there. And then, so I can't remember what floor we were on, perhaps the 6th or the 7th. And adjacent to the building was a open-air car park. It's probably all high-rise now, but at that point in time it was an open-air car park. And he said, can you see that? And in the car park was a maroon-coloured SL500. He goes, that's my new beast. So I was like, I have to do what this guy does. Okay, he's cool, he's having fun, and he's got better cars than I've seen any other doctor have. So that stayed with me. So when I had to make a decision to what sort of professional line I wanted to go into, it felt quite natural to me. Now, to become an orthodontist, that's you specialize. So what it requires is that you undergo general dental training. So that's your undergraduate degree, your bachelor's degree, which is, in the time I did it, was 5 years. Then you'd have to do 2 years of work in general practice, and then you'd apply to get into a specialist training program, which is 3 years in length. So that total process is 10 years, start to finish. So when I finished high school, I was 17, and I entered uni at 17. So I finished my specialist training when I was 27. So they tell me that's the fastest or the youngest age anyone's done it. But as I said, speed and urgency is important. When I knew that this was a path I needed to go onto, and I saw no reason to delay things. I've really never been anyone who's sort of, let me just feel my way through it and see what's right for me. I don't think that's a smart move. I think you need to have confidence in and having a degree of maturity, even at times at a young age, of assessing where your strengths are, where your interests are, where you think you can affect a positive change, and pursue that absolutely ruthlessly. Absolutely ruthlessly, like there is no plan B. Because I think if you leave yourself a plan B, you subconsciously are allowing yourself to fall off the tightrope and get caught by the net. If there's no safety net, I don't think you'll fall off the tightrope.
You'll do
Because the
whatever it takes to
consequences
stay
are bad.
there. Yeah.
That's precisely it. Is Anthony and I, we spoke about this on the Meet Your Host podcast, is him and I at different times came up with the idea of philosophies, or like different names we had for it at the point in time, but they had that delay. In hindsight, I'm thinking back and just going, if I just had have started straight away, there was even a point in time where we both realized we had the same idea, and we didn't even start straight away doing that thing.
And you're regretting the delay.
Spot on.
I've had very much the same experience. Let me tell you this. So, and this will give you sort of an idea of sort of my professional evolution. But I have very much the same experience. And almost everyone who's successful I've spoken to all regrets not taking that step earlier. Yeah. So whether it is, finding the conviction, finding the courage, processing the anxiety and, the nervousness associated with it, that can take time. But so when I finished, I went through, so I basically did my 5 years of my general degree, my 2 years of general practice, and then I applied to the specialist training program. And again, it's competitive to get into. Orthodontics is an area of dentistry that is pursued highly, and there's very limited training training positions, and a lot of people apply, and unfortunately many great candidates don't get accepted because the candidature is so selective and it's very competitive. Anyway, I was lucky enough to get in. So how do cars factor into this story? Well, I'll tell you a funny story about the number plate. The night before I sat my final specialist exams, I rang my dad and I said, it's a big day tomorrow, and I'm starting to feel it. I'm starting to feel it now. So he turned around and said, look, they can examine you on anything from the last 10 years. You are not going to be able to revise 10 years worth of material in a night. Close the books, go and see a movie. Come back home, go to bed, then go to the exam. And the exams go for a week. So this is I can't remember what day of the week it was. I assume it was a Sunday, and they started on a Monday, I assume so. So let's say it was a Sunday night. So I thought, okay, I won't do any reading or, stay up all night. I'll just take it easy. I didn't go out for the movie. I just wanted to stay at home. But I jumped on the internet and thought I'd just surf. And I ended up at that stage what was called the RTA website. It's now called the RMS, and I think it's called MyPlates now. It was called something pretty different. So it was back then it was called RTA, Roads and Traffic Authority, not Roads and Marine Service or whatever they call it now. Anyway, they had an online plate designer or configurator, and I was just mucking around and I typed in ortho, and it came up as available. And I can't remember to book it or whatever I had to pay for it. I think it was $500 or something. So I thought, oh my God, how am I going to pay for this? So I rang my dad up and said, can I get your credit card number? He said, why? And I said, listen, I need $500 to book this number plate. He said, okay. He probably felt sorry for me and said no before his exam. So I got the credit card, typed it in. I think it was $500, but I can't remember. Booked it, went and sat the exams, and I fortunately passed. So this number plate, I mean, people look at it and say, oh, it's ortho for orthodontist, but it has some meaning to me because it was, I saw it and I discovered it literally at the precipice of what was one of the most intense periods of my professional life, right at the end, right at the summit. And at the end of what had been a 3-year process under my professor, Bakrabi, who not only obviously trained me as a specialist, but completely rebuilt my mindset. And when I say that, I mean, I exited that program with expectations of myself, what I wanted out of my life, and the people who were in my life, which vastly exceeded the expectations I had entering it. So I was a very different person, much more confident, even more driven, and the horizon had been broadened. So I realized, well, I'd aimed for here, but I really should be aiming for here. So what I know you're going to ask me about financing cars. What I foolishly did was, before I even had a job, I rang up BMW. It was BMW Sydney or BMW North Shore. I think it was BMW North Shore at the time, or it was Alto BMW. I don't think they have it anymore. I think they're an Audi dealership. It used to be in Artarmon.
Yes, yeah.
But they used to be on the corner there. It used to be a BMW dealership. I rang them up and rang a guy up and I said, can I get a BMW 335i? He said, yep. And this shows you at that time how little I knew about performance driving. I picked the hardtop convertible. Any driver worth his salt would always pick the tin top, not the convertible, right? So I picked the hardtop convertible, and he said, okay, you need to give me $1,000 for, the holding or whatever. And I barely had that in the account, so I sent that through, booked the car, didn't have a job.
Oh, when was this after you?
After I finished the exams, I passed, and I thought,
straight after.
So that's the first thing I did. I went and I bought a car. I would not recommend anyone do that. Okay, anyone do that.
What was the $1,000 for? What was it for?
When you tell them you want to buy the car, you have to put $1,000 down.
So you were actually buying it.
Yeah. Okay. So I put it down. So this is what I do. I'm never foolhardy. In my mind, it makes sense. The dots join.
Yeah.
When you look at it from the outside, the dots may not join, and I'll elaborate on that more as we go along. But in my mind, the dots joined. Well, what's the big deal? I'll have a job, and I'll be able to carry the payments. So what's the big deal? Don't ever spend money you don't have. Okay, that's my honest advice. Don't ever spend money you don't have. However, I did that. Fortunately, at that point in time, I mean, things are different now. This is back in 2007, so 13 years ago. So still back then, there was an acute shortage of specialists. So I got a job relatively easily, and everything was, things went smoothly thereafter. So if you look at sort of my life at key moments, key memories, cars have always been there. It's been something I've used to motivate myself, things I've enjoyed. It's always been performance cars. And that element of speed that I like in cars, I've also reflected in my life, is I've had that sense of urgency, that impatience to get to milestones quickly, not to take time. Now, getting back to the point, you gentlemen have also experienced, why did we not start things sooner? Well, this is what happened. I got a job in a practice, and I worked there for less than 18 months, I think 12 months or so. And at that point in time, my options were to obviously stay on and, the term buy-in, but I really wanted to pilot my own ship. So I decided to start my own practice by myself. So the decision I made was I resigned from my job. Bear in mind, I have no assets. I have a car on lease, which is a depreciating asset, right? And so now I've resigned from my job. I thought, no biggie, I'll go and set up my own practice. What's the big deal? Never, ever, ever in the past had to take a significant loan, ever. Right? So I learnt the hard way. This is now 08, okay? This is now 09. Remember the GFC? So we're now in the GFC. So banks are iffy. So I went to all 4 major banks and all 4 turned me down for a loan. So, and I had absolutely zero money to set up my own surgery, because you'd need floor area, you need to fit it out, you need equipment and the whole lot, right? So by the time the 4th of the major banks had turned me down, I was feeling the pressure. And I did not have a plan B, and I did that on purpose. I didn't want to fall into a circumstance where I had another option, because to me, it made sense, the path, and I mean, it seems foolhardy, and looking back on it, I can see how that criticism may carry some validity, but I still think that forcing myself and having that degree of self-belief that I'm going to make this work created a sense of urgency in me that may not have occurred. Now, it's extremely stressful. You need to be very mentally tough to get through this, and I think that's perhaps where people fall short. They don't want to put themselves in situations of extreme discomfort because it doesn't feel good. But I don't think the universe rewards easy paths, right? So I'm in the crap now because I don't have a job. I've got bills to pay, and I don't even have the ability to set up my own practice. Fortunately, somebody mentioned a bank that at that time operated quite differently, and they were based in the city. And the thing about this particular fund was they would lend you money in an unsecured manner. So they would hedge their bets on you. So I rang the lady up, who I still know, and I've actually treated her family now. You'll find that when you're on your path, the people who help you when you're small and vulnerable, you hold them with great affection. So I went and I met her, and she called me into a beautiful office in the, I think they're called MLC Tower, Chifley Square in the city, right? So it's up in that, hexagonal shaped or whatever, high rise. So I still remember I went into the city, and I was wearing sneakers, jeans, and a wind cheater jacket, and I get into the lift. And the lift opens, and I get in, and the people who get in with me, I think that there was men and ladies in there. I think that the manicures on those ladies probably cost more than, all the clothes I had on and money I had in the bank account, okay? They were immaculate. The jewelry and their presentation, everything else. I'm feeling very out of place immediately. So I go in, and I remember the doors open, and I get out on their floor. And it's beautiful because they have the whole view of the city and the harbour and everything else. So they bring me in there, and they're asking me about what my ideas are, and I'm sweating buckets thinking, how are these guys ever going to take a bet on me? I've turned up just literally looking like I'm desperate, and I was. And these are clearly extremely successful people who know what they're doing. Anyway, they agreed to lend me money. Now, this is where following your convictions becomes key. Shimanto, being Shimanto, now got the money. And I had a vision of what my practice wanted to be like. And I had to be realistic. Orthodontics is competitive. So what my practice is now, like I have 30 staff, and we've outgrown the floor area we're in. And I mean, it's where we started was complete opposite. So it's often difficult for people who sort of see our professional circumstance now, who come into the practice now and see what it is in its mature state, what it was in its infancy. But I had a desire to be the best in the field that I participated in. And then you have to be practical. If I'm the new kid on the block and there have been specialists of repute around for 10, 20 years, what would really get anyone to entrust me with themselves or their children? So I thought I have to give them an experience which was so far superior to what anybody else was doing. And I thought I could do that. I honestly believed I could do that. So what I did was I immediately decided, okay, well, I need floor area. This is the advice I got from everybody, including people who had nothing but my best interests in mind. So their vested interests were my interests, right? Start small, grow big. Who's heard that? Start small, grow big. Right? Start small, grow big. Cautious steps. Sometimes you need to jump into the deep end. If you know your route through the deep end to the, or through the jungle to the location you want to go to, and you have self-belief, and we'll get to self-confidence, self-belief in a second. If you have self-belief and you logically can join the dots, and you will feel it deep within inside you, almost in your bone marrow, you will feel it. Don't ever lose that conviction. So I'm hearing from everybody, start small, grow big, start small, grow big. But I said, it just didn't make sense to me that if I start small, I'm just another small guy on the block. I thought by starting small, it might curtail where I ended up growing to. And I've been proven right with that. But there's been many issues along the way that we've had to manage and many tough times. So what I did was, I said, well, the practice of my dreams needs to be this big. So I found a floor area. So everybody said start small. So I've literally now gone and I'm looking at floor area 8, 9, 10 times bigger than what they told me I should be looking at. The next thing they told me is rent it so that you're not overcommitting. What do? I buy it.
No plans, sir.
No, because I thought this is my life and I need to commit. This is not the time to dip your toe in the water. I need to dive in and I need to keep going, and have faith in my ability that I'm going to grab whatever I need to grab and I'm going to still resurface. So then you obviously have to fit it out. So we could, and again, I fitted it out in the most extravagant manner that I could. So everything the money they lent me, I literally spent all of it on that. So we started the practice, official opening, I think it was Tuesday, the 29th of September, I think it was a Tuesday, 2009. So we opened and things went relatively well. I mean, we were okay. And at that point in time, I had 2 part-time staff. My personal circumstance was that I'd exhausted all funding available to me, obviously, because I put every dollar I had into this. So this was not on the horizon at all. I mean, I'm not thinking of anything like this now, right? I'm just thinking of survival at this point. So what I would do was, and where I was living was nothing like this at the time. I had a small apartment that I was living in, but I realized that to grow my practice needed a lot of work behind the scenes. I just didn't have the ability to hire more staff to do this. I couldn't afford them. So I would obviously do it myself. But that required me doing it overnights. And driving back home required tolls, which took money. So what I did was I bought a roll-out bed and I would sleep in the surgery on Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. Occasionally I'd go home on Thursday night and Friday night. And so I would sleep, let's say realistically, I'd sleep back in the apartment on Friday night, Saturday night, then Sunday through to Thursday night back in the surgery. So I slept in my office. I did that for 2 years. And when we started in September of 2009, I still remember this. It would have been January of 2010. And I was in the habit of, at the end of the day, where my surgery was there, now it's the Bella Vista, close by is the Bella Vista train station. But before the train station being built, there was shops and a petrol station. And one of the shops was a McDonald's. So I was in the habit of walking, or occasionally I drove, but usually I just walked through this BP concourse, and there was an ATM there, putting the card in, taking out $20 or whatever it was, going to Macca's, buying my dinner, and then walking back. And that was I just did that out of habit. So one day I remember walking across and I put the card in and I looked at the balance. I have in my mind $790, but I think I paid my staff more than that. I had 2 girls part-time, but whatever it was certainly not thousands of dollars. It was maybe $790, maybe $1,790. But I realized immediately that was, I think, a Thursday night. And the next Tuesday, the staff needed to be paid. And if I withdrew cash, I wouldn't have enough money to pay the staff. So now I'm in a lot of trouble because I'm literally, there's nothing there to fund things. So my solution to that was, for the next month, I bought my dinner on the credit card. hoping that funds would come in and then subsequently we would be able to stay solvent. So that was one circumstance that was quite difficult.